Welcome back to the DIY Creative Podcast. This is episode 32, and we are going to be talking to Nate Beaudry today, a guy that once went 500 straight days posting new music on the internet like a madman. And Nate, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's get the obvious out the way. There's a little loose bunch of us on Instagram, and we all post music to Instagram, and we do every now and then January on Instagram, and where we post every day for a month. You just never stopped for a while there.
Yeah, I definitely got carried away. Did every day in January, and yeah, then I did like number 32 and number 33, just kind of as like jokes. And then before I knew it, I was a few hundred in and said, well, let me just keep going. And I went till the next January, went through that whole January. And at that point, I can't remember what the number was, but I said, well, we might as well just do 500 and make it an even 500. And at that point I was moving on to a new project. I didn't really have any other real musical projects I was working on at the time. So I said, I'll move on to my other project now. Leave this be at 500. That's enough for now.
So after that marathon there, what are your projects outside of posting to the internet? What kind of stuff can people expect from you?
Well, I don't really know. I'm doing it more as a hobby these days, and I have a few things that I kind of work on, although I'm not super. I don't have the same discipline working on my serious projects, it seems. It's very easy to put that level of discipline behind something that you're just like, oh, wouldn't it be fun if I throw out a song every day? But then when you're faced with like, oh, wait, these are like real songs or real albums I need to work on. Now I'm like, oh, man, what do I do now? So yeah, I've got a lot of old stuff that I want to kind of remaster or clean up a little bit with the new technology, and I've got another project that I throw together some songs every now and again. And beyond that, I've just got my own podcast that I've been doing with a friend of mine for a little over a year now, and that's been my main outlet right now, is doing the podcast.
Well, hey, let people know about that and let them know where they can find it.
Yeah, it's very specialized. It's the Deep Purple podcast. It's all about the band. Well,
God, you Led Zeppelin heads. All you want to talk about is Led Zeppelin, man.
It's all about Deep Purple. And the reason why we kind of started, we've been big Deep Purple fans for a long time, but more so than just Deep Purple is all the bands that rotate around Deep Purple. They, from Deep Purple, that sprung Whitesnake and Rainbow and Ian Gillan's projects, and all of these things kind of swirl around that. So we calculated, but just if we took all the members of Deep Purple and all the albums they've been on and devoted one episode per album, that would probably be about 400 episodes. And we're not just doing that. We're actually talking about other topics too. So it's been a lot of fun just kind of exploring music on a different level like that and talking about it.
So I need to ask, Blackmore is a huge influence on me. And I noticed that when you do guitar work online, Strat, does that come from Blackmore?
Yeah. I mean, I always gravitated towards a Strat, and I'm not sure why. I always just really love the feel of it and the sound of it. And I think a lot of my favorite guitar players, like Blackmore, just were on the Strat. And I'd say even with Blackmore also, Frusciante was I'm a big fan of. So getting that, I also have, besides the Strat, I have an Ernie Ball Music Man Stingray Bass. So, kind of going for that Chili Peppers sound, I guess. And I started out as a bass player and mostly kind of focus on that, but I love to play guitar as well.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you can see, but on my table back here, right behind my 7-string, my Strat is blown up right now.
Oh, no.
Went to do a string change on it, got everything in, and I got a bad input jack. So I'm waiting for the replacement input jack. I could put everything back together again. So I'm missing her, but I got other stuff, but it's like the one thing you can't actually touch. Suddenly you're like, that's really the only thing I want to play right now.
Of course. Yeah.
It's human nature.
I'd always wanted a Strat too, but I just never had one for whatever reason. And I've got a wall of guitars that way. I have this old like 1970 Ovation electric that's really cool that I played for a long time. So yeah, when we moved here to this house about almost 7 years ago, we were living in New York City for a long time, so never really had a space. It was, just a 1-bedroom apartment or a 2-bedroom apartment with kids, and there was no place that I could say, oh, this is my studio. And then when we moved here to, getting a huge suburban house for the same price of a tiny apartment in New York, I was like, oh, here's a little area that I can set up as a studio. Maybe I'll go out and get a Strat now, and since I'm going to do some more serious stuff.
Well, I can say, okay, we talked about this slightly before we actually got online. Studio is a multifaceted term. And a lot of people, when they talk about doing things to their studio to suppress noise, they talk about putting pads on the wall. I've got towels behind all my paintings, things like that. Yet you went out and just built a city of blocks. So that, we were talking about your dedication there, because when you go into soundproofing and to treating the audio, man, you go all the way. That is impressive.
Yeah, it's the QRD diffuser, and it was recommended to me by a good friend of mine who's got a PhD in electronic music and is always my go-to for. His name's Chris Warren, Dr. Chris Warren, I should say. So he is like a whiz with all things audio, and he created this Echo Thief software that will can mimic different audio spaces. So he goes and records a signal in Carlsbad Cavern, and then you take that now and put it in your, I don't know the science behind any of this, but you can now, as a plugin, put that in and say, I want this sound on my recording to sound like it's in Carlsbad Cavern. And you can just do that, which is pretty astonishing to me, how you can even bother, how you can even figure out how to do that.
Line of, what is it? Not convergence, the reverb, where they have different spaces. Never mind, it'll come to me as soon as we're over. There's a version in Ableton, I believe, in Max for Live. Yeah, there's
so many reverb things. It's crazy. Yeah, I really like the Cleverb, Cleve Grand, or I don't know if that's the name of the company, but I bought theirs on Brian Funk's recommendation a while back, and man, it's great.
Another podcast everybody should listen to. Both Nate and I have been guests on Brian Funk's podcast. And for those of you that have been around the internet a while that may not know who Brian Funk is, you may know Afro DJ Mac, which is a name he now thoroughly rejects.
Yes. It's funny. I got this dumb, this chef elf that I use it's just my Instagram name. And it's something that my friend's younger sibling had a name she had come up with for me, like as a little kid. And I at the time was, I don't know, 20, and I was signing up for AOL for the first time, and I needed a screen name. So I was like, oh, let me just do that. And then here it is. And he had a great podcast about like rejecting that name and stuff. And I mean, I don't have any problem with the name, but it's just kind of goofy to, I was like, but I've put out all this stuff on this name. I've had websites for 20 plus years with this name. What am I supposed to do? And then he just comes along. He's like, yeah, I'm Brian Funk now. Gets rid of it. And now I'm like, well, that looked really easy. And nobody really skipped a beat. And the only thing is my folder still is Afro DJ Mac on my computer, but I just drag all of his new packs into that folder. I've got all of
these sound packs from this dude that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, it's really weird. And I mean, I told him too. I said, you have the advantage of having one of the coolest possible real names. So why not be Brian Funk? I mean,
it sounds fake, right? Brian Funk, I mean, music producer, music educator, Brian Funk. Yeah,
like, I mean, it's almost funny that he ever did Afro DJ Mac. Why deviate from Brian Funk? That's the coolest name ever.
But hey, it works, and he never really missed a beat, so that's great. No. People are going to get tired of me bringing this up, but since this is about tips for people that are in the indie community and all, and choose your artist name wisely. I pay the price right now for Senator Jaiz because I like to run ads on Facebook when I have new things come out. Well, every one of my ads gets immediately rejected, and I have to go through an appeal process, which isn't bad. It's me writing them and saying, look, 35th time, Senator Jaiz is my artist name. I'm a musician. I am not a politician. I do not speak on public or any social topics. I actually make instrumental music, so it'd be really hard to read anything into it. And then they they used to always just let me through. So it's a put in for the ad, get rejected, put the appeal in, get through. But right now I can't get through hardly because they're down. They don't have the same editorial staff that they used to, or they don't have as many people on it. The algorithm catches me, and then it's really hard for me to get a human to catch my my appeal. So
forget that.
Yeah, so only like one in three were going through. So I'm like, you know what? I got a new album coming out. This one, I'm just going to sit it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, it's like I could be happy about it and just be like, yeah. Or I can just write to Facebook and get immediately stressed out and be pissed for a week.
It's funny. As soon as you started, it never occurred to me before, but as soon as you started that story, I was like, of course. I mean, it makes sense, but yeah, you're not, like you said, you're not dealing with humans with any critical thinking skill. You're dealing with algorithms. Right. They're very unforgiving.
And in that vein, Shelf Elf was a great name.
Yeah.
What is their rebuttal? You are not authorized to speak on Christmassy crap. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, but So you built that great. Actually, we have one of those in our radio studio. We have a radio studio and a TV studio at the museum, and we have one of those in the radio studio, but we bought it.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We didn't have to put it together.
I looked at some of the. I mean, they're like $500 a panel or something, and there's 8 panels back there. So, yikes. Yeah. I had this as I started doing the project. I had this kind of wacky idea, like, wow, maybe I could start making these for people, make some money. And then I made these, and I was like, nah, I never really want to do that again.
Man, you'd have to charge, man. That's why they're so expensive. I've got a bag of blocks back there that the God kids used to come over and play with and stuff. And I've been thinking about just sticking those to a board and do a small one, But
yeah, I think you could probably achieve. I mean, there is some egghead mathematical reason why that's the best format, but having something to diffuse the sound in any way is where I work. They have up on the wall, they have something that's like all these boards sticking out, and I'm like, man, if they ever get rid of that decor, I'm gonna tell them, hey, don't throw that in the dumpster. I'll take it home, because I was like, that I don't know what the math behind it is, but it would look cool, and I think it would probably work a little bit.
See, now we've stumbled onto a secret of the indie world. You get your resources where you can.
That is for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
DIY is not just the music you create, the studio you do. It's everything involved is DIY.
Yeah. And it works pretty good. I mean, and I've got a pretty good dead sound in this room, and, I've got carpet, and behind the monitor, which I was like going to pull my webcam off, but I'll never get it back on.
Right.
I made some really cheap frames out of wood and put some really thick insulation on there, covered it with fabric. God, it probably cost me $50, and hung those all on the wall. So yeah, there's not a lot of kickback in this room, which is good.
Yeah, I went the cheap route. Well, I have a couch, I have a bookshelf, have heavy drapes. The picture frames you see, like I said, they're hollow in the back, and I'll have them stuffed with towels. Another DIY trick. What I'm really missing is bass traps behind my desk here, and in that corner over there. And eventually I'll get to that, but so far so good.
Well, the funny part is, it's like I do almost everything either electronically and almost always with headphones. So there's really, people get really hung up on, I have to have this piece of equipment or that piece of equipment. And I think like Brian has said on his show before, you already have everything you need. If you have a computer, you have almost everything you need. Yeah, you can get, this MIDI controller I have here, this little keyboard, God, less than $100. And I've never felt the need like, I need something fancier than that. And, I've got my guitars that I've always had. I did buy my little, midlife, present sort of guitar for myself, but for the most part, even if you've got a simple MIDI controller, and to a point, you don't even need a keyboard controller so much as this. You can even use something like a push or something now, which actually I guess would be a lot more expensive than this.
Yeah, pushes they're a little pricey. I have one of the original ones. I never felt the need to upgrade.
Right, because what's how much more are you going to get out of dropping another $500 on one?
Well, this is another good point for those that want to are considering being an independent musician or recording for themselves. 2 points just came out of this conversation right there. More equipment doesn't mean better music. The music is the music. So if you can play it on this keyboard right here, you don't need one that costs $500 more than this. Maybe that'd be a nice to have if you have the money, but you don't need it. I mean, this is a Novation Key Studio, whatever it is. This was not expensive. I do have the original push, but that came in the whole thing where I got Ableton Live and I got the package and I got the push. Never felt the need to upgrade because one person was talking to me one time. I was sharing something on Instagram and their big comment was, "Is that 10? Is that 10? No, that's 9." And I just bit my tongue so hard to ask him exactly what having 10 would have had any bearing on the song that I had just created.
Yeah, exactly.
Because there's new things, yes, but you've got everything you need. I make some of my songs completely on my iPad now, just because I can.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I was recording things 20 years ago when I first started to get into hard disk recording. I was using Sony Vegas, whatever, 2.0 or whatever.
I remember that.
The first one that came out, who knows, or one of the first ones anyway. After,
it was a video editing program that was better at audio.
I don't even know if it was video at that point, or if it started out just audio, or I know it, but now it's known more for video, right? But yeah, I had a studio in with my friend Chris that I was just talking about earlier. We had a studio and we upgraded from I don't know if you can see behind me, there's an ADAT back there as well. We had 2 ADATs and, we eventually just said, let's go strictly hard drive, and got a 9 gigabyte SCSI hard drive, which was like unthinkably large at the time. And, started recording everything directly to that with Vegas, and then being like, wow, instead of 16 tracks, we have unlimited tracks. This is a pretty good upgrade.
It is amazing how parallel some of the stuff you're talking about is actually to Brian Funk, because that's sort of the way he came through with the ADAT, and
yeah. So when I listen to his show, sometimes I'm like, man, I feel like we've lived these parallel lives. The way he discusses his struggles with ADAT and everything, and now I just think about recording anything without a visual component. I'm just like, I can't believe I ever got anything done. And sadly, I got a lot more done then, right. Mostly because I probably had fewer work and family responsibilities. But I just had this little Tascam 8-track, which I actually also have right over there. And I recorded on that and was extremely prolific in how much stuff I could do and create and put out with something that was so limited.
That's but okay, that was the other point. I said there were 2 points, and you just nailed it again. Limitations. When you don't know, then you just use what you have. But right now, we have so much ability to try to make things perfect. Everybody tries that. Sort of like I'm talking about, I need bass traps back there, but I make music without them right now. People forget that some of the stuff we love and we listen to, you have a Deep Purple podcast, man. That stuff would not pass the muster of the production snobs today.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And it was perfect. It was perfect because it was
you've got some of the greatest rock musicians, arguably some of the greatest rock musicians of all time, and depending on what lineup you're talking about, take your pick. Like you talk John Lord, Ritchie Blackmore, Ian Pace, all these people who are just at the absolute top of their game. What more did they need? They didn't need to do anything fancy, and they didn't.
No. I mean, they even survived. I think they wrote a song about it, that their whole studio burnt down in Montreux one time. I don't know if they wrote a song about it. I think there was a song about that, right?
Doesn't sound familiar.
Oh man! Luckily, the Rolling Stones had a mobile though.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, mobiles meant something different back then than they mean now. Kids are like, they had a mobile. They recorded it on their phone. Well, they could have. Now
you have more technology on your iPhone right now than they had in that giant bus they were, dragging around Switzerland.
Yeah, I mean, but okay, let's be honest, man. Would Pet Sounds or Sergeant Pepper's been as great as it was if it was recorded today? The limitations kind of made those because they had to push every limit humanly possible.
Yeah, I mean, and even then they were like, George Harrison stumbles on a sitar and let's stick this in some songs. Imagine if they had an unlimited resource of instruments and sounds and every other thing like that we have. I mean, I know it's the current climate or recording environment that we have is a huge blessing that we have all the stuff at our fingertips. You've got great guys like Brian who put out these amazing packs of great sounds and everything, but it's scientifically designed to make me less productive. Yeah. And I know it works that way for everybody, but from my personality, I've got this perfectionist tendency, which I've learned over the years, doesn't mean it doesn't mean what I think it means. It doesn't mean I need everything to be perfect, but it's just like I have a trouble committing to anything. Like, well, I could do this sound, I could do that sound. And then before you know it, 3 hours have passed and you haven't actually done anything. And it was a really hard lesson to learn, to just say, you know what, instead of getting every pack, every plug-in, every whatever, to just stop and say, you know what, I'm going to grab the nearest guitar, I'm going to plug it in. I don't care what it sounds like. I can twiddle those knobs later and just get something down. And when you actually buckle down and do that, it's amazing what you can actually do.
That's why I didn't upgrade to 10. I couldn't justify the price because I was doing everything I needed in 9. And at that time, that's when I had started getting into producing on the iPad alone, like I said, just because I could. But I'm going to trigger some of the youth today, man. We were around for this stuff. I'm going to trigger some of the youth today. Back when Sgt. Pepper's was recorded and Pet Sounds were recorded, well, the Beatles had 2 4-track tape decks. So to get all of those tracks in, they had to get to a point, mix to a point, and then bounce a track, which meant that was written at that point. You could never get it back. Yep. You could never unbounce on tape. And you add all of that together. If you wanted a click track, it was put in manually. There was no click track on your system here. You had a board, and you had a mixing board. You could put multiple tracks to a bus with a certain effect on it. But if you wanted to affect the individual channels, if you wanted a compressor on one and a different compressor on channel 2, you had to go buy 2 compressors, which at the time probably cost about $10,000 each.
Yep.
I mean, so... Man, we live in the golden age. One of the things that just rubs me the wrong way is when I hear anybody, old or young, say, "But if only." Like, but if only what? You have a phone. You can make music easier now than some of the greatest albums in history.
Yeah, I mean, as much as the tyranny of choice can stop you from doing things, sometimes I do kind of think back to what could I have actually accomplished and gotten done back then if I had some of the technology I have now. It's unthinkable going back 20 years even, or 25, that we could have what we have right now and that would work the way that it does. If you went back in time and said in 25 years, this is what you'll be able to do, you'll be like, that's impossible. Yeah. Unlimited tracks. Like, wait, how big is your hard drive? Like 8 terabytes? How big is a terabyte? I don't even understand what that is.
16 gigs, 24 gigs. I mean, that of RAM.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I had 64 K. The Commodore 64 was 64K, not 64 meg. It was 64K. It didn't have a hard drive. If you wanted to do something on it, you had to load it with a cassette tape.
I remember I had a IBM 8088, which was one of the first personal computers we had, and it had 640K of RAM, which is 10 times what the Commodore had.
Yeah.
But we upgraded it, and the board to upgrade it was about this big, probably about that big. It's the size of, I'm trying to think if you're listening audio wise, probably the size of like almost of 2 CDs, like 2 CD cases back to back. We put that giant board in there, brought it up to 1 megabyte.
1 megabyte
from 640K.
And this one's small. This is like 64 megs.
Yeah, that's nothing. A 64 gigabyte flash drive.
It's like, wow. But that being said, man, some of the best music in the world was made back then.
Of course,
kids today trigger you again. Back in those days, if you made a mistake, you couldn't adjust it in MIDI or chop it up and just keep. No. You had to go back from the beginning or cut in on the tape and play your part again.
Yeah, you'd have to punch in, and that was that was the worst.
Yeah, it's we've come a long way, but that being said, I mean, with choices, I said this with Brian when I was on his cast. Actually, when I was on Afro DJ Max podcast.
Who's Brian?
Yeah, who's Brian, man? I used to pirate a lot when I was younger. The world owed me something. I couldn't afford it, so the world owed it to me. Say whatever you want. That at one time in my life, I think we all go through that phase. But the thing is, I had Cubase, I had Ableton, I had Acid, I had Vegas, I had several more. I probably had Fruity Loops at some point. Never made a single anything beyond a loop on any one of them. Then one day I took my money, I looked at it, I'm like, cash, cash, cash. Boom, I threw it down on Ableton. I said, this is where I'm going. And I started putting out music. I was like, wow, that was all it took? Just to learn an actual program and run with it and not just have everything?
Yeah, it was hard for me to move to Ableton. When I got my studio back up and running, I got whatever like the most recent version of Vegas was, because that's what I knew from, at that point 15 years ago. And I talked to my buddy. He's like, you got to use Ableton. So I got a maybe not so savory copy of Ableton, and I opened it up, and I was like, oh, man, I just looked at it and I was like, oh, I hate this. Like, it's not what I know. And he's like, trust me, there's so much more functionality. And, I just forced myself through basically making digital copies of all my old analog stuff onto this format. I learned how to use it. And by the end of that, I was just like, wow, I'm so glad I did. I really understand this software now. Well, I mean, I don't understand it. No, I shouldn't say that, but I can use it. And like you, I'd gone through that phase too. And you realize you're not making music. You're just collecting things. You're collecting sounds and software that you're never going to use. And I did the same thing. I do have Ableton 10. I upgraded when that came out, and, being legit, apart from feeling a little bit better about it and limiting your choices, it's also great for tech support, because you can get some nice free tech support. But to your point about Ableton 9, like there's some nice features in 10, but it's not like, oh my God, I could never go back to 9. How would I survive? I did plenty of stuff in 9 and it came out fine.
Yeah, one feature I do actually envy a little bit in 10 is I don't know what it's called, but it's where when you record something, you can recall it. You don't lose it if you know what I'm talking about. You probably know what it's called.
Yeah, it's always recording, and if you can retrieve things if you're not recording or something. And to be frank, I have no idea how to even use that. I've never used it, but it was one of those features that I went, and that's another thing. When Ableton 10 came out, I was like, oh my God, that's the best feature ever. That's so cool. And it is, but I've never used it. And I've had Ableton 10 since a year and a half or whenever it came out, shortly after it came out. Well, so it's a cool feature, I'm sure. And if I knew how to use it, maybe I would, but I've never used it.
One day.
Yeah, one day it's good to know it's there. The thing that I've probably has been the biggest for me has just been the inclusion of Wavetable, which is really awesome.
Right.
It's like having, an Omnisphere or something built right in. And the more I use Ableton, the more I am just like, I just want to use native Ableton stuff. I don't want to use these third-party effects.
It works better. It crashes less.
Oh, it's so smooth using anything within Ableton.
Right.
And there's so much stuff available. I'm always like, whether it's free or not, I'm always looking for packs on Ableton. My first thing will be like, I want this sound. Let me see if anyone's made an Ableton pack. And sure enough, it's popular enough that there've been a lot out there. Like I got some really great Mellotron Ableton packs and stuff. And I used to have I still do, but I bought the Amplitude Mellotron. I forgot what they call it, because I love the Mellotron sounds, and it's great. But using it as a third party with an Ableton, and then you have to reinstall Ableton, and you have to go through figuring out all the third party things to reinstall. It's a huge hassle, and just finding a Ableton Mellotron pack, which is 90% as good as the one from Amplitude, it works great.
Well, when I'm working native in Ableton, I have gotten to the point now where I pretty much do use just native Ableton stuff just for the ease of it. But when I use other things like other synths, or when I'm recording my guitar in, I use Tone Stack or Amplitude on my iPad. And then I'll use my IM1 on the iPad, or I'll use the I have tons of synths on the iPad, but IM1 and the Audio Kit Synth 1 are my two favorites. I use that a lot. But when I record that into Ableton, instead of going in MIDI, which may complicate things, I go audio. I go old school, and I record it as if it was done. I treat Ableton like an old school studio, where if I mess up, there is no changing things. There's no fixing it in MIDI. I have to re-record it. Keeps my chops up too, and I need that because my chops aren't that great.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, and I've gotten so much lazier knowing that. I mean, it's when we talked about punching in before on tape, it was such a nightmare. And now doing a punch in on Ableton is like nothing. I can hack my way through any guitar part. And like I said, I grew up playing bass. That was my first instrument. It's what I'm strongest on. If I was going to be in a band, that was probably what I would want to play. And what I generally will do is I'll put together some drums, some guitar, some keys, all of it mostly for the most part looped and edited and everything. I'll put that all down, and then I grab out my bass, boom, one take it, and then I'm good. And for whatever reason, I guitar I can do a much better job of, but keys I'm way too sloppy, and drums, forget it. Like I have to do something looped.
Well, it's really funny. Working in Ableton, I could pretty much do that too. And it's fun. When I'm sitting here alone, I'm in my studio, I need to drop a track, man. I go in, I use Ableton to build my backing tracks, go in, drop my guitar, do whatever I have to. You know where I have a problem? And I just learned this last week. They call it red light syndrome. Like when I go to record something for, let's say, Instagram, right? I'll be sitting here and I'll be jamming for like 10, 15 minutes, man. I have such a flow going. As soon as I hit record, I start messing up like crazy. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? And, sometimes I put it up that way because I don't care. But, it's like as soon as I hit the red light. Now, that red light syndrome doesn't exist when I'm recording into my computer. It's only when I'm recording video to share. For some reason, I go nuts. And I'm like, wow, that note isn't in the scale. That's not anywhere near that key,
Yeah, of course. Yeah, or I'll record something and I'll get 75% through it and mess up, and then I record it again and I get 50% through it and then you record it again before and after 5 minutes you're messing up the first note, and you just have to walk away from it.
I've got it to the point where I try to get a minute, and after a few retakes I'm like, well, 35 seconds will do because that was a flawless 35 seconds.
Exactly. Cut it off right at the mistake.
And then I go back into Ableton and I'm right back to flowing. Red light syndrome. It's a thing. I just learned this, and I suffer from it. It's so easy when there's stuck. You look at it completely differently when you don't think anyone's going to hear it. Well, what's crazy is when I play out live, it's the exact opposite thing. Like I know that video's going on the internet. Maybe it's because people that don't know me and will judge me harshly and will say horribly mean things about me if I mess up on the internet. Maybe that's what it is. Because I've gone and played live. When I play live, many a times I'll go out there, I'm feeling loose, I'm feeling good, I flub everything up, I don't care. I look at people, I point, and I keep going. I don't care. Or I'll have a flawless performance, or it all goes to hell, and I don't have stage fright. It's just like, that happened.
Yeah, and I haven't played live in a really long time, but I did play in bands for a long time as well, and but yeah, there's something about, like, I'm the same way. I never was really nervous about getting on stage, and I would get there and you mess something up and you just keep going, and there's something about the impermanence of it. But when it's, and like, I think it comes back to me to that perfectionist thing is, oh my God, this is the final version of this song forever. That's going to be represented of it. But at the end of the day, who cares?
Yeah. The person that's listening on the end, whatever it is that's driving you nuts, they'll never hear it.
For the most part,
this brings up kind of something funny that, and you've probably seen this since you make music with computers now, and it's not just strictly electronic music. It's people that make music with computers. You'll see these comments out there where people will say silly things like, "Well, I like my musicians when I see them play live. I like them to have practiced their instrument for years, and they're blah and they're blah." And I'm like, this is the perfection fallacy, because I dare any one of those people. I love Billy Gibbons. I absolutely love Billy Gibbons. ZZ Top, I love ZZ Top. A lot of the licks I know now, I stole straight from Reverend Willie there. But there's this idea that that they're seeing this stuff live that is perfect. And I'm like, I dare you to go watch any ZZ Top concert. They're all over YouTube. They're all over the internet. They're all over cable. Go watch a ZZ Top concert. And you'd be amazed how many times the Billy Gibbons misses a note. Or the Sharp Dressed Man is a great example of this. Sharp Dressed Man, in you have your main riff, the dun 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 dun, and then you have a 3-note flourish. It's dun dun dun. There's a slide. He doesn't do that live. Live, he hits the riff, and instead of doing that little flourish with the slide, it's 3 on the E, then 1 to 3 on the A, and then 5 on the D. Sounds simple, but when you're doing that live, that's actually a little bit of a performance there. He just hits the 3 and goes straight to the power chord, which is the 3-5. Da-da! But people have this in their mind that when you go live, you hear things perfect. And the only people that have to play things live perfectly are tribute bands, because if they didn't, they'd get drummed off a stage. But go listen to any Rolling Stones concert. Oh my God, you wonder if that's the same songs on the album sometimes. But I'd still pay money to go see them.
Oh, of course. And going back to Deep Purple, one of my favorite performances by them is when they played the California Jam in 1974. Yes. And such a great concert. And of course, it's flawed as hell, but they it's so incredibly entertaining to watch and in hearing. And John Lord is just a master on the keys, and he's the king of, like, he hits a wrong note, so he hits it again and again. He turns it into a little pattern. It's like, oh, he just played it 3 times, and it's not wrong anymore.
You play it once, it's a mistake. You play it 3 times, it's right. And Glenn Hughes in that, could he find a key? Glenn Hughes is an amazing singer. You got Coverdale there just hitting it, right? And Glenn Hughes gets up there and just,
Yeah, he's out of control. It's a great show.
And then Richie bashes a camera, an ABC camera. They blow up his amp. He flies. And okay, you'll know this. And I'll start the story, and if you want, you can finish it. But Richie Blackmore almost got arrested before they went on stage that night, because
and after.
Yeah, and after they had to run. They promised him, they had a light show, and they promised him that they would go on after dark. And things were, for once in the history of rock and roll festivals, were going ahead of schedule. So he barricaded himself in his room, in his dressing room.
Yep.
And they were coming for him.
Yeah, they had built, the people who ran the show were just geniuses, and they built an actual railroad track and had each stage on a big giant railroad car that they moved along these railroad tracks. So when a band was done, the other band was already set up. They just wheeled them over in 5 minutes between bands, which never happens. So but Richie was, the whole band was badgering him. Let's just go on early. And he's like, nope. I said, we're going on at dusk. We're going on at dusk. Yeah. And so they were banging on his door, trying to get them out. And then he in an act of aggression, destroys the camera, blows up his amps. The fire department, police are waiting for him, and they just ran to a helicopter and hightailed it out of there.
But that's
the way you do it.
That's rock and roll, man. That's rock. I'd still say that even though that movie, gosh, is it Almost Famous? The Cameron Crowe story. Even though that's mostly based on the Allman Brothers, I still say to this day that them bailing out on that concert and having to jump on the bus and break through the gates to get out of that when the singer was shocked, I still think that had to somewhat be loosely based on the California Jam.
I think it was a lot. I think it was an amalgamation of like a lot of different famous rock stories. I haven't seen that movie in forever. I'd have to watch it again with a Deep Purple lens. Yeah,
that was a good movie. That was kind of like back when rock had rock gods. See, this is another thing that the internet has killed, totally killed. The mystique of the rock and roll, man. The mystique of the rock gods, and even the pop. I mean, everything was so tightly controlled back in the day. The magazines would only release what the labels wanted released. You had these massive stories, and you didn't know what was happening day by day. I mean, the picture of Glenn Danzig coming out of the store with kitty litter that they made a meme of and messed with him for like how long, right? And
James Hetfield he was like outside of Abercrombie and Fitch or something, holding I forgot what store it was. He's holding the shopping bags.
Right. I mean, it's like, and now everybody feels like they're like, hey, I have a right to see all this. And they don't understand how freaking cool it was that, okay, Kiss, good example. Everybody in the industry knew what Kiss looked like. Kiss did not stay in the makeup 24/7. Kiss had a life, right?
Yeah.
But it was in everybody's best interest to not let us know what Kiss looked like.
Yeah.
None of us knew what Kiss looked like. Fans, nobody, until 1984. or was it 82? Whenever Lick It Up came out, that was the big reveal of Kiss. And how the hell did they keep that under wraps for so long? The women that they claim to have been with. I mean, well, I guess if cell phones would have been back then, it would have been over. But I mean,
sure.
The mystique, it meant something, and that's all gone now, man. It's like now, okay, you like John Mayer, you knew he farted yesterday. I mean,
yeah, there's no mystery left. I remember with Kiss, my co-host on the Deep Purple podcast is actually a huge Kiss fan, and he had that Kisstory book when we were kids, or well, teenagers or whatever, whenever that book came out, and it had like a newspaper article that they published when like Kiss revealed, we figured out who they are, and it showed the four of them and all the names are wrong. It has like Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley's face and all. It's kind of interesting that, and there'd be no way to keep that sort of thing a secret now.
Well, I mean, just not saying that, not saying that Kiss is the greatest band in the whole world, but they knew their secrets. Okay, just last week, or I think Friday, Bob Kulick died. That's Bruce Kulick's brother. Now, terrible. Bruce Kulick was an official member of Kiss in the 80s, in the non-makeup time. But what a lot of people don't realize is I think it's Creatures of the Night, Not Music from the Elder, I think Unmasked, and a couple of other albums. Bruce Kulick was the Kiss guitarist. Ace Frehley was just in the photo shoots. And they kept that secret until just a couple of years. I think Eddie Trunk is the one that broke the secret a couple of years ago, because nothing's actually sacred to Eddie Trunk. But I mean, even Bob Kulick, who it would have gone a long way. That guy was one of the best session players of all time. But he could have really got a lot more clout had he been able to say, hey, I played on Creatures of the Night and I played on Unmasked and all that. But he couldn't. They told him, you do not say anything, and he didn't. He kept the secret. And so Ace Frehley's last real album with them was probably Rock and Roll Over, I believe, if my chronology is serving me correctly, or maybe Love Gun. I can't remember which one came first.
Did he do any? Did Ace do anything on The Elder?
I don't think, because Elder came between Unmasked and Creatures of the Night, and I think by then he was pretty much just a figurehead. He may have. I mean, I'm sure he actually played something on those albums, but Bob Kulick played a big chunk of that as well, you know? I think by Creatures of the Night, Vinnie Vincent had even come in a little bit.
Yeah, I think Ace might have done A World Without Heroes, but I'm not sure. My Kiss knowledge is not super strong, but it's Bob Kulick was great. And it's amazing. Kiss is such a strange band in that way that there was, and maybe there was just more of that going on that was never uncovered or reported, but there was so much between songwriting and session playing. There were so many different people involved in that band.
Ezrin, a lot of people don't realize, but if you look at Kiss albums, you'll see Vincent on it. Well before and well after they kicked him out the band, he was still writing with them, and they built these mythologies about things. I have to be honest with you. When I was a kid, man, Kiss was great with me, but the sleazier side of, not so much Paul Stanley, but the sleazier side of Gene Simmons to me has really damaged. It's actually damaged my old good thoughts about them a little bit. You know, it's like. Yeah, Gene's tough. It's tough to get. Hey, I think he's honest though, because he says the dumbest and sleaziest things. You know, I don't think he's holding back. You know,
no. If he's holding back, I'd hate to hear what he really thinks.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of wow. I can't resolve that early Kiss, when they were really scrappy and really putting out good albums, that they were as calculated as Gene Simmons tries to say they were back then. I think they were just a rock band banging it out. And I think as they grew bigger and bigger, they became what Gene Simmons says they are now.
Well, Gene Simmons says a lot of things. Like he talks about how on his solo album he was going to have the Beatles reunite, but they on his solo album to perform. But there was a problem with the scheduling. They just couldn't get it figured out. My favorite part about that is he said something about like there was a problem with Ringo's scheduling, so they couldn't work it out. It's like, okay, so you're telling me you could have had John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison on your album. But he said, no, that's not good enough. Yeah. I need Ringo as well.
This is how it happened. He minorly talked to him. They said, well, whatever. And then he said, okay, I'll talk to Ringo. They all call Ringo and said, if you agree to this, we will fuck you up.
And Ringo's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I have a commitment. I can't do it.
I've somehow landed another Playboy Playmate waddle for a wife, and I'm busy for the next 5 years. Oh, man. So, Nate, I'm going to go down a path here, and I'll edit this out if you want. But one of the things I like to bring up is in the modern day world of independent musicians and independent artists and DIY musicians, we no longer feel like we have to fake that this is our gig anymore. That we all pretty much have a second gig. Would you like to talk about that at all?
Well,
not necessarily what you do. I don't want to give anything away. I mean, if you're uncomfortable, but.
I work. It's actually it's pertinent to what we're doing now. I have what would be considered an essential job, and it's basically as a I guess you'd call it a general manager at a retail establishment, and so it's been quite a wild ride the past few months, unlike anything I've ever really seen. So while I'm jealous of seeing a lot of people saying, oh, I'm so bored, I'm stuck at home and working on projects and stuff like that, or I'm working from home, and I'm just like, I'm still going into work every day, and on top of going into work every day, trying to make sure everyone's keeping 6 feet apart and wearing masks and every other thing. And then on top of all that, the last few days we've had protests nearby and riots, potential riots, I should say. I'm south of Chicago, so it's been pretty crazy there. So there's been a lot of boarding up of windows and things like that. We had to actually evacuate on Sunday. So it's been it's been a pretty crazy wild ride.
Well, I for one, I'm not going to give away any personal information, but you're my hero for what you do and where you do it.
well, I appreciate that. I think it's. We talk at work about having perspective, and one of the guys that works at my location was saying something about, I don't know, we were just kind of commiserating about like, oh my God, this is rough and all this. And then, I brought up something like, hey, it could be a heck of a lot harder. We could be in a hospital right now. We can complain to each other. I can complain to people who are working from home. But if a doctor or nurse walked by me, I'd be like, no problems for me. I've got no problems at all. Good for you. Good for you. Thanks for doing what you do. So, it's.
Well, the grass is always greener. So you hear those people talking about, I'm working from home, I'm doing my projects, I'm lazing around. I don't know if it's different for me than them, but man, working from home for the museum, it's hard for me, man. It's hard. I'm sitting here in my studio. I'm surrounded by my toys. This isn't a whine. Trust me. I'm not saying, oh, poor me. Look, I'm surrounded by my studio.
Oh, no.
I'm just saying the mindset. At first, it was like, oh, okay, turn on the computer, and from this time to this time, I work for the museum. But as the days are grinding on, it's affecting me mentally a little bit. I kind of I can't really talk about the museum and opening or anything like that. But of course, the plans are in place. The plans are in place everywhere. Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to being able to change my scenery a little bit, just because this has kind of grinded me out.
Well, it's hard if you're like trying to be creative or productive, and you're in the same place where you sleep and where you eat and where you watch a movie. And now I have to go into work mode. My wife works from home, and she's worked from home for a while now, maybe the past 5 years or so. And she's an editor-in-chief of a magazine, actually, interestingly enough. But up until recently, the kids have been off at school. So she gets kids are not at school it seemed long when we were in school, but then you have kids and you're like, wow, you drop them off and they're immediately back home. So, she'd only have really from 8 a.m. to 2:30 to get any work done. And now nothing. And besides that, they were at home doing their homeschooling. So it's not just they're at home, but now you're having to try to get them through their homeschooling things, and that's their e-learning, which is a struggle because the kids are not necessarily super interested in it, because they don't get to go and get that scenery change and see their friends and have that engagement level they would normally have.
It's got to affect them way more than adults.
Oh yeah, And my wife generally loves working from home, but since whatever, in the middle of March, it's been very difficult. And now we're in the summer where it's like, nothing really changes except there's no e-learning. We got to figure out something for them to do all day instead of just for however many hours.
Well, hey, you did mention that South Chicago there, and I have an anecdote that I don't get to tell people a lot because most people wouldn't appreciate this, but I think you will appreciate this. I lived abroad a couple of times. I lived in England for 3 years, and I lived in Germany for 2 years. Well, when I lived in Germany, they loved Elvis in Germany, right? Mm-hmm. They loved a lot of things. When you hear these other countries talk about our culture and shit, they love our culture. They love it in their own way, though, right? So it's so hilarious. One of my friends had a car. Most of us took the bus everywhere, took the train. You know, we lived right across the border from Salzburg. It's beautiful. We lived in the Bavarian Alps. And he had a car, and he was blasting it. And the radio brought on Elvis in the ghetto. But Germany, ghetto means something completely different than it does in most of the rest of the world, right?
Sure, yeah.
So, as you know, in the song, they talk about Chicago in the verse. But then when they get to the part where they say in the ghetto, they changed it to in Chicago.
Really?
So the whole song wasn't in the ghetto; it was in Chicago. So Germany
was it actually Elvis's voice, or did they just put somebody else's
voice? It must have been an alternate take or something, or it was very well done fake. I don't know.
Oh wow!
I was listening to it through a crappy stereo in a car with the windows down because nobody had AC there. It was summer, and we were driving along, and I was cracking up, and the German dude didn't know what the hell I was cracking.
He's like,
"What?
You've never heard this song before? It's a classic."
You guys must really hate Chicago now, right? Because this whole song about in the ghetto, man, is in Chicago.
That's incredible. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense that they would do that, and it's just amazing. Yeah, you meet somebody from Germany and say, "I'm a big Elvis fan." I'm like, "Oh, you are? What's your favorite song?" In Chicago. I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah.
I thought I knew Elvis really well. Can you sing it for me?
And, you know, it's one of those situations where I look at my wife and I'm like, am I hearing this? She's like, you're hearing this.
In like, Chicago.
This ain't right. And she's like, oh. No,
it's like you're in some weird alternate universe. Like, that's Elvis's voice, but I don't know what I'm listening to right now.
I'm like, at that point, I'm thinking, wow, I bet you the people of Chicago knew about this. They would just love that Elvis based this song in Chicago, because in Germany, at least, maybe other countries that listen to the German version, in Chicago.
Yeah, it could be a lot of countries in Europe listening to that version.
Yeah, you know, so I'm like, I thought you'd get a kick out of that, seeing
That's good.
Just in case you ever do come across a German, then you say you're from Chicago, and they're like, I'm sorry.
Oh, it must be terrible.
Yeah, you must have it so bad, you know. Oh, well, you know, get over it, you know. So, Nate, so you juggled like I do, work, music, podcast. Any tips or anything you can give people in the DIY community to kind of help grease the wheels, to not feel so alone, to maybe to if they feel stuck or if they feel like overwhelmed? Man, I just probably overwhelmed you with all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to like mid to late March, I was definitely hitting that part where I'm somebody who doesn't really, I never feel like I'm stressed, and I'll just reach a point where I get sick or feel sick or whatever it is. So of course, during the early parts of this COVID thing, oh my God, I've got body aches. I think I got a cough. I'm short of breath. And then of course you read and say, oh, all the symptoms of anxiety are the same symptoms of COVID. It's, shortness of breath and, feeling achy and things like that. So I'd go to bed thinking, oh my God, I'm going to wake up tomorrow. And I wake up tomorrow, I'd feel fine. So I was definitely feeling very overwhelmed at a point, but I think the only thing I really focused on, I guess with the podcast and stuff like that, is I still had the same level, if not more, to do with work and the kids, but it was just really carving out that time that's non-negotiable. And, my wife it helps that my wife has been fantastic about that. And she knows on Monday nights, I get the kids to bed. And then I go down and we do our show. and it's kind of a non-negotiable thing. And we're, you know, sometimes if we're having a crazy day, she'll get the kids to bed, but I try to say, you know, hey, if I get the kids to bed, this is going to be my 2 hours to get the show done or whatever. So it's just, you know, I've talked to a lot of other podcasters too who put out the show maybe a little more haphazardly than we do, and that's the other thing, is just trying to stick to the schedule of recording and releasing. And it's not easy, but it's just trying to say, this is on Mondays at this time, this is when we make the show, and on the following Monday at this time is when it comes out. And because of that, and I had a trip planned and my co-host had a trip planned, so we banked a few episodes in advance. And then, of course, we had to cancel our trips because everything was closed and canceled. So now we're like going a month out. So it's good having that little buffer to know, like, if worst comes to worst and we have to skip a week, we're still 3 weeks ahead, you know, and just trying to bank it all up in advance and make sure that you're holding yourself accountable. Now, I have a co-host, so we keep each other in check. But when I was doing the 500 days by myself, it was just that accountability with myself. I'd know every day I got to get my butt down there. And God, sometimes it would take 10 minutes. But there's some days where it's just like, I don't want to do it. I don't have any desire to do it. I don't have any inspiration. It doesn't feel like it's going to be fun. But there was never a time where I didn't get my butt down here in the studio, sit down and do it. And at the end, there was never a time where I was like, oh, that stunk. I'm always like, oh, I'm really glad I did that. And holding yourself accountable is not easy.
You know, that's kind of what's happening right here. I started this show with just me talking about things with the indie community, things I hear from others, things from the local community. And I got to, I believe, 27 episodes, and I hit a wall. And then I didn't record for maybe 6 months. And then I did an episode. The infamous I'm coming back episode. That's, of course, the last episode, you know? And then that kind of flailed away. And then I'm like, you know, I always wanted to interview people. Because then I'm not responsible for 100% of the content. Also, my ideas are not 100% what goes out. I get to hear from other people, and I can bounce ideas, and we can do this. And so the show is revived now, and it's fun to do again because I have another person to talk to.
Oh, yeah. I could not do my show by myself. Initially, I was kind of like toying with doing it by myself, and I have so much. I know Brian occasionally would do a solo episode. Of course, they're much shorter, right? Because it's very hard to do solo. And you did your solo show for a while, and I would always listen. And a few other friends of mine that I've met through this kind of network of people who do band podcasts. It's a crazy amount of people that do it. A friend of mine that does a Black Sabbath podcast, another friend of mine does a Lynyrd Skynyrd podcast, and they're great. And I listened to them, and it wasn't until I think the guy who does the Skynyrd podcast said, hey, will you come on and do an episode? Not as a guest host, but as the episode. And I was like, oh, that'd be awesome. And I did it by myself, and I was like, oh my God, this is so much harder. It's like a 25-minute episode. It took me 10 times as long as doing one of our 2-hour episodes, because you're like, wow, I'm the only person here. You're second guessing. And then we talk about, like we were talking about before, oh, I got to change this. I got to change that. I'm going to go back. I'm going to record that again. Whereas when you're having a conversation with somebody, it's so much easier to relax into the content. Yeah.
Well, I thought I would be able to do this. I did for a few episodes, but I have to admit, if you were listening, I started getting dark. After about 16, I started getting dark. And it's because that was starting to encompass me. But I thought I could do it because my history is, I played in punk bands as a youth and all, but my recording started when I lived in England, and I got signed by Mevio in 2005 to do Indie Music Blast podcast. And I thought, well, that's a solo podcast. I did it. I did 485 episodes, but there were several things that were different. I had a co-host. I just performed him. So I was talking to myself in voice. Yep. Second, I was playing music. Literally, back then we were able to license what we call pod-safe music at the time. They were independent bands, so I was playing music. So I was a DJ. I didn't have to carry an episode with my talk. Now, I had little comedy snippets in between, little news snippets in between, but that was easy because I always knew that I could come back to a song. So I did 485 episodes, and then I trailed off because that ended in horror. Because anytime you sign, people, be careful what you sign. Be careful what you sign, because when you sign away your name to things, it could really ruin it for you in the end. So that didn't end all that great, and that turned me off. So then I went a long time before getting back into podcasting. And that was when I started recording my music. I'm like, well, now I've learned all this stuff about recording. Why don't I actually start putting my music out? So that worked out. But then I got back into podcasting, and I'm like, hey, I can do this. I used to do it. And I was like, it's sort of getting dark, and this is the way forward for me now, actually talking to other people. So long way to say that. But
yeah, it works a lot. Yeah, I remember hearing that you were with Mevio, and it used to be called Pod Show, right?
It started out as Pod Show, then they changed the name to Mevio. And that's the moment where every one of us should have clenched our butt cheeks and said, oh, here it goes.
Yeah.
Here it goes. Things are about to get dark.
I mean, I only know about it through Adam Curry, actually.
A lot of people don't realize that before it all came to a horrible end, Adam Curry had been forced out of the company.
Yeah.
It was Baran. You know what? I should not say things that could get me on the line on the line legally. So
we'll talk about this after the episode.
The elf in the cowboy boots. That could be anybody. Not the shelf elf. Chef elf is cool.
It's hard to say.
Cowboy boots. He was not so much. But yeah. Man, Nate, I really enjoyed having you on today, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's been a blast talking to you, and it's funny. It's interesting. That's like the first time we've ever actually talked face to face, but it doesn't feel like it at all when you develop these kind of relationships online. I find myself so often like having these meetings or talking over Zoom, and then being like, "Oh yeah, we've never actually physically talked before." It just feels like it.
I have that reaction every time. I'm like, just get into it. It's like I start bringing up stuff, and it's like, wait, there's no way in hell I should actually know that. But it works, So Nate, where can people find you and find your stuff and all that good stuff?
Well, you can, if you are interested. I'm fully intending on doing January again. This will be my 4th January coming up in January. So I fully intend to do that again, and I release all the stuff on Instagram. So I will do that again, and it's Chef Elf on Instagram. If you type in Chef Elf, I kind of corner the market on that. But you will find some pictures of some weird, like Christmas, like you said, Christmas elves or whatever. And then if you are interested in Deep Purple, you should definitely check out deeppurplepodcast.com or search for Deep Purple on any podcast catcher, YouTube, whatever it is. We're on all of that stuff and all social media. So if you're a Deep Purple fan, it's definitely something to check out. We dive into albums and topics and stuff, and don't take any of it too seriously. Where we crack a lot of jokes and have a lot of fun with the material. So
with that said, is there anything we haven't touched on that you may want to touch on before we get out of here?
I don't know. I think that touches on a lot. I think if you are, I think you brought up a lot of great points. And if you're looking to be creative, don't let anything get in your way. You have everything you need right now to get started and to do it. And yeah, you can I think it's much better to just, shoot and then aim later. You can make adjustments. You can get this little piece of gear. You can make your room adjustments. You can do any sort of tweaks after, but just start putting out content, and you'll be impressed and amazed at how easy it is to put out great content without having the best equipment ever.
Yeah. Well, what I like to tell people is, at the same point in time, Poison and Black Flag existed. Which one actually made the better music, but which one had the better production?
There you go.
That you may hate Black Flag, I don't know, but I'd always tell people that, So.
No, it's true. Yeah, and do you want to? I have a hard time thinking of an example, but do you want to listen to some crappy band with amazing production, or you want to listen to a Beatles bootleg?
Bingo. Can't really end on a better topic. Nate, thank you so much for being my guest on the show today.
Thank you, sir.
And with that, everyone, we'll let you get back to your regularly scheduled programming, which, let's be honest, is probably Netflix. See ya.